Well, hello, and welcome or welcome back to the Curious Coaches Lemonade Stand with your host, Dr. Gina. Thank you so much for stopping by, taking time out of your day. I know how precious it is to stop by our friendly neighborhood virtual third space, a spot where you can stop, get something quenching for your thirst, maybe even a thirst you didn't know you had. Think about something new or maybe something that resonates because it reminds you of something older. But in any case, to give you a little bit of quenching refreshment and something that makes you say, And without further ado, I have a wonderful guest today from all the way across the pond. I'd like to hand over now for her to introduce herself. Please meet Polly.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much, Gina. I'm Polly Rafferty, and I've been known as the speaker storyteller. I teach people how to utilise storytelling in their talks and in their business. I'm just pivoting at the moment to change the script because I believe women have had their scripts stopped. They've been we're more likely to hold ourselves back, not explain ourselves, not talk about what we do, not bother anybody. And we have all of these internal scripts that hold us back, stop us moving forward, and stop us being the person that we could possibly be and have the business that we deserve and the life that we should be living. And a lot of this is due to societal stories, historical stories, familial stories, and all of these things that are there to hold women especially down and hold us back from reaching our full potential. So I'm working on changing those internal scripts that we have, those stories that we've been brought up with where we're not supposed to, we're not good enough, we're not as good as, or we should be quiet, seen and not heard, all of these stories that we've grown up with over the years, and challenge the societal stories that are still there, teaching men to be men and women to be women. And because it's not serving anybody, it's not serving the men, it's not serving us. So it's time to start changing those scripts, changing those stories, and hopefully change society in a positive way. So that's what I do, that's what I'm passionate about. And I've loved storytelling ever since about 2005 was when I first discovered oral storytelling, when I was just overcoming anxiety that had me trapped in my own home, and my life changed the moment I stepped on the stage and told my first story.
Wow. So that is, first of all, let me just say thank you for being here, Polly, because what drew me to having you as a guest today is just how resonant your work is. And there are lots of ways in which I can see it dovetail with my own work as an executive and leadership coach, oftentimes working with women, racialized women, LGBTQ2S women, those whose not only have their scripts been running in the background, as you said, and I mean, I had like, it hit me viscerally when you said seen and not heard. Oh, I remember being told that a lot as a child, a lot. And I can't imagine, telling my own children that. I think I mentioned it to them recently. I was told that as a kid, and they looked at me like I'd grown a third eye. I'm like, that was a daily occurrence from friends, neighbors, family. And so I think it's incredibly important to change the script. And I have to say, my interest is piqued in this 2005. If you're open to sharing a little bit more of what brought you here, I'm very curious.
Absolutely. It was 2005 that was really the start of my journey, to be 100% honest, because that was a time where I was at my lowest. I'd been trapped in my own home due to anxiety that was brought on by a life event that I wasn't expecting. I'd been groomed as a child, as a 16-year-old, into a relationship with a 36-year-old,
Oh
which had
my.
become aggressive, abusive and controlling. But there wasn't just me in that relationship. He had another woman in that
Oh
relationship
my.
as well. So there was the two of us, and she had his child. And eventually I managed to escape and they moved away. So I thought that I'd never ever see them again. And I was just in the corner shop by where I was living, and in she walks, child in tow, years later, with just her normal smirky face. And it just knocked me for six. I thought I was getting on with my
Yeah.
life, and I had my first ever full blown panic attack. I thought I was going to die. My heart was racing. I felt like everything was was just moving away from me. It all felt muffled. When you know what it's like when you've got headphones on and somebody's talking to you, and it felt like I was in a bubble. And I somehow got through that conversation and managed to pay for my milk and get home. But from that moment, my anxiety started to grow. And it turns out she was living just opposite the train station where I needed to get on the train to get to work.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and every time I went past there, I kept thinking she was going to come out. I was going to see her, and I kept trying to go out, but eventually it got to the best of me, and my anxiety got so bad, I couldn't even go into my own back garden to put my washing on the line because I thought somebody was going to tell her everything I was doing and what was going on, and all of these abnormal thoughts going through my head. But I'd been subject to trauma from the age of like 16 to 22, 23 when I managed to escape, which is a very formative period
Very
of
nice.
time. And I just couldn't do it. But I was lucky enough to have some friends who weren't going to leave me to rot in my four walls. My partner at the time wasn't very supportive, but my friends were, and eventually they got me out and they took me out slowly and surely. But at this one point, in 2005, I was sat in this dark, dingy pub where I grew up in Birmingham, the UK, and saw this woman who was absolutely breathtakingly beautiful to start with, and she was gorgeous. And I sat between two friends, just barely holding it together, and watched her take the room on a journey through different universes. You know, she took us way back to a completely different place, and she held everybody in their thrall, and it was just fascinating, and I loved it. I looked around and everybody was watching her, and there was no muted conversations and things like that. And I managed to see her about 3 or 4 times in quite quick succession, and eventually I picked up the courage to say, well, this is fascinating, you know, how did you do it? Could I do it? And she said, yeah, you could do this. And she gave me some hints, tips, gave me some book recommendations. And it went from there, really. I booked myself onto a training course. I told my first story. Then I was invited to tell the story on an open mic night full of comics, poets and musicians. And I got up there and told a story. I was absolutely terrified. I just wanted to run and hide under a table. But the moment I stepped onto that stage, I felt that I could actually reclaim that anxiety and make it work for me, not against me, and that I could make a massive change in myself from doing that. And I felt alive again for the first time in forever. I felt alive, and my life has just got better and better from that moment. The guy who invited me onto the stage is now my husband. We've got 2 kids. We live down
Oh my
south.
goodness.
Yeah, he's been my biggest supporter ever since I told that first, well, before then, but ever since I told my first story, he's been the one there going, come and tell it at my open mic, go and tell it here. He's pushed me and helped me and supported me. And then in 2019, I wanted to start sharing my stories through my life, because up until that point I thought I haven't got a story to tell. But when I realised I've got my abuse story, I've got stories of debt, I've got stories of overcoming anxiety, mental health, depression, and I've got so many other stories. I've recently was diagnosed with autism and ADHD and hypermobility and all of these other things. So I was going to start sharing my stories, and then the COVID hit, and I started going on to social media to sort of figure out what I was doing. And a lot of businesses said, you've got to tell your story, you've got to tell your story. And I was thinking, well, what story? What story do I tell? Because I've got so much that I tell. So I branched out into helping speakers and businesses find the right story for their right audience. And moved on from there. And then I did a diploma in narrative therapy, which I got a distinction in, which I was very pleased with. Done some psychology training, so many things. And back to my passion of storytelling, because we've been doing it for 40,000 years.
Yeah.
And it's part of our society, builds our society, creates our society, and our society is reflected in the stories that we tell. So I've researched that we have psychological, neurological connections with it. We listen to story more than we listen to anything else, and it's absolutely fascinating.
Stories are completely transformative. And, I was chuckling when you said, you thinking, well, what story do I tell? And I'm like, you just told me a story. You have tons of stories. And and I'm curious if you find this in your work as well, that this is the case with your clients, that they have a hard time even conceiving of what could my story be. But when you start to pull at them, there's hundreds, if not thousands of stories within each of them.
Yeah, so much. And it's the smaller stories that need to be told more regularly. It Because nothing big had ever happened to me. There's people with much worse life experiences than me. There's people that have done so much more than me. But I'm still a person, and there are still people out there experiencing similar things to me. I've experienced more than a lot of people. I've experienced less than some, but I will have experienced something that a majority of people will have experienced.
Right.
So a lot of the time we look at motivational speakers especially, and they've achieved something amazing, and they've achieved something brilliant. They've climbed Mount Everest, or they've made a multi-million-dollar or multi-dollar company, or they've run marathons or done something extraordinary. And most of us, we come away from that thinking, yes, yeah, I can do that. If they could do it, I can do it, because they say I could do it. But then life hits you in the face. You've got the kids to take to school. You've got the lunches. Your partner's in a bad mood. The telly's not with, but your Wi-Fi goes down. All of these sort of things can happen, and life just gets in the way. And slowly and surely it says, you start thinking, oh, it's all right for them because X and Y and Z, and they've done this, they've done that, and it's just way too far ahead from where you are now to what they've achieved, so you can't actually see yourself on that in that journey. So the motivation wanes. But when we tell our own stories of success, even if it's just the success of going from beating yourself up over all of the things that you didn't do in the day, because I've lived with chronic fatigue, and there's been days where I've not been able to get out of bed or do much at all. So instead of lying there beating myself up about all the things I didn't do, I started to celebrate all the little things that I had done.
Yes.
So I'd got up and cleaned my teeth. And these are the stories that people need to hear, because they'll
that's
be
what
lying in
resonates.
their
That's what
bed.
they're going through.
Because they're going through it, yeah. So then they can see themselves in that small space, and they can achieve that. That gives them the inspiration, and inspiration breeds motivation. It grows that motivation so that you then take those steps and those actions. I was talking to somebody the other day after I'd given a training course, and I said, you can't just get up off your couch and run a marathon. You've got to first learn to run from one lamppost to the next lamppost, and from that lamppost to the next lamppost. We're there to give them the first lamppost. So they can run to that first lamppost, and then they can see that we've achieved something else and run to the next lamppost. And from there onwards, it's one lamppost after the other, and then they run the marathon.
Yeah, no, I love that approach. So it's not so overwhelming. So tell us, Polly, what is your typical client like? Like when they come to you, or perhaps how do you find them, and what is it that they're looking for? What problem are they trying to solve exactly?
A lot of the time they're not really sure what the problem is. They just know that there is a problem there that's stopping them from moving forwards. Or they've been told they've got to tell their story in business, and they've got no clue. They say, oh, I haven't got a story. I haven't got a story, Polly. Or they want to get up on stage and start speaking, but they haven't got the confidence to do it, and they don't have the confidence to share their story because they think nobody wants to hear my story. My life's boring. So it's... or they're a lot of neurodiverse people as well. They have even more negative comments, and they've got even more negative scripts that need to be addressed and changed. Right. So we look at, we don't go back into trauma. I am trauma informed, but we don't go back into trauma. We don't do that. I'm not a therapist. I've a diploma in narrative therapy, and I could be a narrative therapist, but I'm not. Well, how I work is not it's supposed to be a therapy session. Some people say that they feel like they've gone through therapy, but it's not full on. I share that. Yeah. We're not going back to the cause of it. We're expanding the reasons behind the stories and then changing them. So I explain a lot of generic reasons why we have the stories, because we all have very similar stories, and a lot of them come from very similar places at the very core of them. And then our life experiences will come in and fill up those gaps in the stories and make those negative. I like to put it as a wall. So you're filling in the, you're putting bricks in a wall. So every time you have something negative happen, you fill in that brick on the wall. It's like when you see this, the reticular activation system. I always get that slightly wrong. Which, if you buy a green car, you're going to see green cars all over the place,
Yes.
because that's what
Yes.
you're aware of. So if you're in that negative script space, or if you've got a negative script, then you will start to see the negative in everything and build that wall up, and ignore the positive things that could build up the other wall.
Right.
So what I teach is people to take the things from the negative wall and move them over, so that we're building the positive story, the positive wall, stronger and bigger than the negative wall eventually. And we get
Very powerful.
we get all that. So there's a lot of people, they don't actually know why they need me. They've just come because they feel drawn to what I'm offering and what I'm doing.
It really, I really empathize and felt it when you talked about being trauma informed and being able to do that kind of work. However, that's not the specific approach that you're using. I relate very much. As a coach, I'm trauma informed as well. I've lived through trauma, and there's a lot of ways that people often jokingly say to me, "You're like my corporate therapist." And I'll laugh, but like you, I say, "But we're not going to roll around in it." I have a
No.
therapist. I very wholeheartedly believe in therapy.
Oh yeah.
However, when clients ask me, what is the difference between what you're doing in therapy? And I'll often say, we're always looking toward the future. That's our orientation. We acknowledge what has happened, and sometimes those are terrible things, but we're not going to roll around in it, because we want to look to where you want to get to, and not hyper focus on where you've been without,
Yeah.
again, putting that under the rug and not acknowledging it. How do you find yourself able to do that with clients that might be perhaps more reticent and kind of feeling like they need or want to do that venting or that rolling around, when you want to move them into the kind of iterative steps, those incremental steps you just described, to get them to where they can tell their own story, with confidence and with power?
Yeah, it's guiding the narrative that they're telling themselves as much as anything. So it's full of guided questions, guided guided information. So, and I'm lucky enough to have a load of different therapists in my contacts. So if it gets too much, I say, I'll tell you what, we'll leave it here, go and speak to my amazing colleague who specialises in this, and we can, because I always say, you never ever tell a story that you're not fully healed from. So if they're not fully healed from the story, they need to heal from it first before they can start telling it, because then it triggers them, it triggers their audience, it causes more trauma, more stress and more upset. So if they're constantly wanting to go back over that trauma or the wound, it's like they're just picking at a scab, and they're just
Yeah.
going to open it back up again. So I always say you need to be healed from that before you start talking about it, because you're sharing it with people that are going through the same thing that you were. And if you're still feeling that raw emotion, you can be emotional about it, but you can't feel that raw emotion
Yeah.
with that story, because that will then can trigger trauma in the audience. So then I'd send them off to do some more work on that, and we could look at a different story that might not be as impactful but will be easier for them to tell.
Interesting. Yeah, as you were, sharing that very important caveat, it kind of tickled my brain. Has she gone through this with a client before? Have you had someone that really wanted to tell that story and you really had to convince them, wait, no, not yet the time? How do you help someone sort of, just overcome that obstacle? And are there people that move through that while they're working with you, or does it tend to be, no, we need to choose another story while you might, concurrently work with a therapist or a practitioner on that?
They'd need to choose another story, because repeatedly telling that story in the wrong environment to the wrong people can really cause a lot of damage. It's not it's not healthy. So it's better for them to be with an informed therapist who can guide them through it and help them overcome that, because it's just like going back to the wall analogy, it's just like adding extra paste, extra what is it, concrete to the wall, to make it bigger. If you keep going over the same thing and you're not healed from it, I mean, some people it can help them by vocalizing it. I have worked with somebody who the moment she vocalized it for the first time, it cleared so much for them that she felt confident and happy. It was just getting over that initial hurdle of speaking it and not being struck by lightning or whatever. So that can work, but if they're getting too emotional about it or too upset about it over and over again every time they start to talk or trying to share their story, again it's not healthy for them. So they need to get the right support first.
Yes. And if you're open to sharing, Polly, thinking back to when you first found your way to the stage, what gave you the ability, the confidence, the capacity to go up and share your story? I know you shared, some of the kind of supporting cast of characters around you, like your partner, and that's incredibly important. So I'm just wondering, what actually created the ecosystem for you to feel ready to share?
Initially, I started with traditional stories, so a traditional oral storyteller. So I'd tell stories that I found were engaging, had an interesting message, had strong female characters in, but they were already written. I just broke them back down and built them back up in my own words to make my own story, to create a story that was unique to me. And then I started telling my children stories to help them navigate school and problems that they had at school. And then I started to share, just amongst friends, really, my stories about overcoming anxiety and having depression, especially when I went through a few depressive moments. I don't like calling them episodes as such, because it's not an episode, it's part of who I am, it's just a dip. So I went through some depressed periods of my life, and started to share it, and I was open with people about it, and they came back to me and said, thank you so much for sharing that, because I've been on antidepressants, or I've been feeling really low, and now I don't feel as alone as I did. And that was when I started to think, actually I need to get out there and start sharing my stories. We need to start sharing more of our stories so people don't feel so alone, because although we've got social media and we're more connected than ever,
We're still lonelier than ever.
we're lonelier than ever, because we see all these things on social media where everybody's perfect and life's brilliant and they've got perfect homes and perfect lives and they're doing all these wonderful things, but you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And for our young people, I'm passionate about our young people. I've been a youth worker for 10 years, over 10 years, and I could see it. They're more and more disconnected from the society that they're living in, because they're watching everything else that's going on social media. They feel less confident for the future,
Yeah.
because they're being told all of this negative stuff. They're getting all the negative
That they're
stuff,
less than somehow.
that
They're
they're
making
less
people
than.
less than.
Exactly. So we need more stories that will resonate with our young people, because fairy tales were supposed to be there to educate, entertain, and empower people. That's what they were there for. The myths, the legends, the fairy tales that we were brought up with, but they don't fit in with our lifestyle and today's society. They haven't grown to adapt, because they've been put down on paper and they've been made to they've been adapted by filmmakers or by other people to be more sanitary. So we don't get the same impact from them, and also we're not getting the same messages from them, because you change an aspect of the story and it changes the whole story.
Right.
And there's nothing that our young people can relate to, really, because you haven't got Cinderella sat on a mobile phone or trying to, there's trolls, mobile trolls trying to
Oof.
go at her. So there's all of these stories and lessons that our young people need to learn, but they're not being taught it because they're not having the stories of people going through it and experiencing it for them to vicariously learn through.
I think that's a really important point. And, I'm thinking to the kind of clients that you would be serving and thinking about the push that I've seen in the last few years on corporate agendas to have the skill of storytelling under your belt.
Yeah.
And I find, I coach a lot of C-suite leaders, and for them, it's it's absolutely integral. That, I mean, it's up there with your checklist of, are you able to manage a team well? Are you able to demonstrate confidence? It's now right up there. Are you able to use storytelling to relate data in a way that is going to bring people into your vision or onto your journey? And if they can't do that, they panic, right? And so I'm wondering, what are your thoughts around the importance of storytelling in that kind of way, that kind of avenue, and how perhaps have you worked with people on improving that skill for them?
Yeah. Storytelling, like I've said already, it's part of who we are. We've been doing it for 40,000 years. It's the way we communicated. It's the way we communicate with the world and with ourselves. And business is just really starting to, some of the bigger businesses, Apple and Nike and all of these have created their identity through story. And the best teachers, the best educators they do it through story, because we're 22 times more likely to remember something that's said through a story. So if you've got something really complicated that you need to explain to somebody, if you explain it through a story, it makes it so much simpler.
That's the explain. It's like I'm a 5-year-old, right?
Yeah,
When someone says that triggers. You need a story with my facts and data. Okay,
yeah.
got it.
And we actually listen through our brain fires differently when we're listening to a story than it does when we're listening to facts and figures. Plus, it triggers emotion, and we all like emotion. We're emotional creatures, so we'll emotionally buy something and then we'll rationalize the reason for buying it later.
Yep. Very true.
So when I work with people, I try and find a story that can help them explain what they do, or if it's complicated, what they do. Working with other clients, their stories are really important. So if they can get the permission of a client, or keep it so that it's completely no way of tracing that story back, they can teach that story, they can tell that story. So it's using empathy stories, or even just other stories that work. So Aesop's fables, a lot of those stories can be actually adapted to use within a working environment, and storytelling within a within a corporate environment, with leaders sharing stories with their staff, and their staff being able to, their colleagues being able to share stories with them. It brings them together in a more human way. It becomes less of a them and us situation, and becomes more of an us all together situation, because they understand them more. So yeah, stories in corporate is so important. Storytelling skills are really important, but it's knowing the right details, because sometimes people can undershare or overshare.
Yep, that's very true. When you said that previously, when you first started storytelling, you were adapting existing stories, and then eventually, you moved into telling your own stories. How did those feel differently for you, delivering them on a stage?
They do feel different, because the emotion for me is real. When I tell a story, a traditional story, I put myself in the place, in that space, so I can describe what's going on properly. And when you tell an oral story, you're taking someone on a journey. You're taking them through a world of magic. So you need really rich descriptive words, really rich metaphor, and if you put yourself in that position and take them with you, it can really have a massive impact on them. When you're telling a story for business or to support someone, you don't need quite that much of a positioning. You don't need quite so much rich descriptive language. You just need it so that they can understand it. So knowing your audience is really important for when you're telling your stories, and which parts of the story will resonate better. So I touch, and it depends on how much time you've got as well. So I touch on different parts of it and share different parts with different audiences. I share different stories with different audiences. I think I've actually forgotten the original question, and I'm going off on a bit of a tangent.
No, I think you were addressing it. I was asking the difference between telling an existing story that you've adapted versus telling something that is a personal story of yours. So I think you did.
So I am on the right track. I do do that sometimes. I just go off and start wondering, because I love storytelling. I've been studying it for 20 odd years, and I can go off on a bit of a tangent. But learning about storytelling in business, which I've done over the last 5 or so years, there is a vast difference, because you're telling to educate. So when you tell a story just for entertainment purposes and a little bit of education, because somebody's going to take something away from that, but if it's primarily entertainment, then you leave the audience to make their own decisions and make up their own mind about why you've told it, take their own lessons from it, because whenever you tell an oral story, there's a lesson in there for them, and they take their own story, their own message away from there. When you tell stories within business, or within when you tell stories in business, there's a purpose to the story, and you tell the reason why you've done it. And when I'm sharing my personal stories to other people, it's to inspire and to support and help and give them knowledge of how I dealt with it, so they can look at themselves and go, right, okay, she's done it, I can do it. This is how she did it. That's not going to quite work with me, but I can do this. And when I do talks for organisations and things like that, there's always a link. I'm setting up a link on my website actually for next steps. So if people need help with their with their journey, if they're in an abusive relationship and they want to step out of that relationship, there's going to be details on there for them to reach out and help people, so that they can find somebody that can help them, and things like that. Because a lot of the time, the stories that they get are the stories that you tell yourself when you're in a traumatic relationship like that, is that you're safer in that relationship, because you don't, because that's the devil you know, exactly. So it's giving more links to people with more stories like that, or links for people to be able to recognise that they can actually take those first steps and reach out to somebody.
Very empowering. I love the amount of agency and the sustainment that provides for them. So Polly, my last question on this is, do you have a particular time, a particular experience that stands out in your mind as just a highlight of your storytelling career thus far?
Apart from, because the biggest was that first story, when I stepped onto that stage for the first ever time, that will be with me forever, because I really didn't want to, I just didn't want to be there. I wanted to hide, I wanted to run away. I thought, what am I doing? And I actually took that step and stood on the stage. I thought, I'm in a room full of people who are slightly drunk at that point. They're here to watch people play music, tell poetry and make jokes, and I'm standing here telling them a story about fairies and a 5-year-old child, because it was a story that I'd made up myself. And I'm thinking, I'm just God knows what, so many things went through my head, and I just went up and I told the story, and people listened. And it was like it was almost like it felt like the first time anybody had really listened to me as well. And that's got to be my best ever. But every time I speak or stand, and people are nodding and engaging and listening, and if I get a round of applause at the end, every time it's the best time ever. It's just, it makes me feel like I've helped or supported somebody else. So I can't really pick one specific thing, because the next one is always the best one, because I get better every time I
Oh, I
speak,
love that
every time I
answer.
tell a story. I get better. I'm learning new things all the time. I'm never stuck. I've got about 5 different books on the go at the moment about different things. It's the ADHD brain. You get bored of one thing, go on to something else, but I keep coming back all the way around. So yeah, I just love it. Every single time is the best time, and then the next time's going to be the best time.
Oh, that's such an amazing feeling. Even just the way you've described it, to think that yes, it's been amazing and it's only going to get better because I'm always working on myself and helping myself get better. I mean, if I'm a potential client of yours, that's a big green flag. That's a beacon of light that says this is the kind of person I want to work with. So
Yeah.
that's very incredible. I'm so glad you shared it. And, I'm so grateful. I think at the start of our conversation before we went live, I learned that you too are a tarot reader.
I
And
am.
so I am very happy to close off today's conversation with this. So this is, I think, a fairly popular, one of my favorite tarot decks that I use a lot, the Tarot of the Divine by Yoshi Yoshitani, because it's all about myths and stories from around the world. So I thought, I hope Polly agrees because I think this is perfect for this conversation. So I always shuffle on camera so that I don't know what card's going to come out, but somehow the universe gives us something that connects to the conversation. Never fails. Thank you. We've got the Empress, Polly. What a beautiful
Amazing.
card. In this deck, it's a depiction of the Virgin of Guadalupe. And the Empress, number 3 in the major arcana, it's all about creation, fertility, motherhood. Oh, I'm getting chills thinking about how passionate you are about the cause of children right now and the story that brought you to storytelling in the first place. Oh, what a perfect card. This is a wonderful, I think, exemplification and embodiment of who you are and what you do. You create. She brings everyone in, she welcomes all, and she takes and almost alchemizes anything into being fertile ground. She uses all of it as nutrients for the soil. And wow, I think that's just a beautiful reflection of what you've shared with us today. Such an excellent example, and especially it's a sacred feminine energy too. We've talked about working with women and children. Oh, thank you, universe. That was beautiful.
Perfect. Thank you.
Very welcome. Well, Polly, it has been a joy and a pleasure to learn about what you do today and what brought you on your journey into, this life path that you're walking. It sounds incredible, and it sounds like you are positively impacting so many people and recognizing, as I always say, as someone who's worked in diversity, equity, inclusion for a long time, it's a journey, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint, and it is the micro steps, the micro pieces, the micro stories that you've mentioned that bring us to fruition, to the point of fullness that we want to get to. And it's recognizing that we have the agency, as you said, to change the script, to take power over what our stories are and how we're going to tell them.
Yes.
So this has been incredible. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been great. I love talking about it, so I could talk about it forever. So any opportunity I get, I'm there. I'm going, yes.
Well, this, like I said, such a treat to all of the viewers, listeners that have checked in. Thank you so much for spending time with us. I hope we got to fill your cup. And, please remember to like and share with others. Share the joy and the love with them. Fill their cups as well. And you can always check back. And if you subscribe, you'll be notified when the next episode is coming. There's lots of good stuff coming up in the upcoming weeks. And we're going to just keep on focusing on growing together in this wonderful third space. So thanks for stopping by for some lemonade, and thanks, Polly, for stopping by with us too. Such a joy, such a pleasure. Be well, everyone. Take good care. Until next time.